Hey guys, Poro here with another video, this time going over the LTA North. I'll go over the very few amount of roster changes that they had, and then I'll get into ranking the teams. So LTA North is one of the regions that didn't actually change that much. We had some regions, like the LPL, go absolutely crazy, and then we had other regions, like the LCK, who changed basically nothing. LTA North falls under that LCK kind of category. LTA South, on the other hand, falls into the LPL category, but we'll get to that in the LTA South video. So there's not really too much to go over here. All of the changes that we got were on the teams that placed near the bottom, so of course it would make sense that they would want to change something. The first change, and probably the one that has gotten the most publicity, is Dignitas swapping their top laner. They got rid of Surti and they replaced him with Photon, and I've been seeing a lot of discourse about this online. You have the people who are Surti fans, who watched him in Academy, who think that he deserved more of a chance, and that maybe he was elo held by the team, or that the org did him dirty, or stuff like that. And then you have another group of people who just hate that overall the LTA North seems to be pretty bad at developing Academy talent as a whole, and then so they just group Surti into the massive list of Academy players who maybe got a short shot on a doomed roster and then got sent packing and never made it back. And then you have a third camp of people, which I am part of, which is the camp of he just didn't play that well. Like, he came into the team, we had very high expectations, and not only did he not live up to those expectations, but he in fact showed a lack of any understanding of how to play top lane at a high level. And at the time it was like, well, he's rank 1 on the solo queue ladder by a significant margin, but the champions that he was getting up there with were stuff like Camille or Vayne top and whatnot. So he really didn't have that same kind of practice on a lot of the standard top lane champions that he was expected to play. So he just, to me, I just don't really think he was good enough to stay in the league, and it is what it is. Maybe he can come back and get better. He's definitely a pretty solid mechanical talent. He's had a few games where he was able to have a large impact or looked like the only serviceable member on his team, at least towards the beginning of like winter split and whatnot. But personally, I don't mind Dig replacing Surti at all. The replacement that they went for is Photon, and I don't hate it, but I'm not a huge fan of it either. So Photon was on Vitality. He started in the LCK then he got picked up by Vitality for that one team that was the Bow roster. On that team, he actually looked pretty solid, and for a large portion of time, he was definitely contesting the top spots in the top lane role in that region. So people were saying that he's the best, or they were saying he's the second or third best. Then after that, he kind of got booted out and was sent to the TCL, and ever since he's been in the TCL, he has not been impressive. His teams finished middle of the pack every split, and he never had extremely great performances either. And it's not like his teammates were bad, because I checked his team and they had players like Mask on it and stuff, so it's just leading me to believe that Photon is probably not as good as he was when he was on Vitality before. So I don't know how he's going to look here. I will assume that it's not going to be the same as it used to be. It's probably still an upgrade to Surti, but I don't think this will end up making too much of a difference. Then you have Disguised, who made 2 changes. They don't have Abbedagge anymore, they're going with Darkwings. Darkwings was a player who existed in the Tier 2 North American ecosystem. I've known loosely about Darkwings for a bit. I've never like sat down and paid attention to his games or anything, but personally, I don't have a very high opinion of the NA Tier 2 or Tier 3 scene. I think that it's gotten to the point where North America has kind of ruined it enough that there isn't much value left. For example, we saw that the best team in this Tier 2 system in North America was a team that had 5 former LCS players, and then that team went and lost to the Pain Academy team in the joint playoffs tournament that they had before Winter Split started. So I'm not expecting much from any of the players that come up from there anymore. We have seen examples of players being kind of raised from there and turning out okay. Like, we have Massif and Jan, who were both very recently part of the Tier 2 system and ended up becoming pretty good. So maybe there's hope, but my expectations are low. And then they also picked up Rahel, and this one is an interesting one to me. I'm sad to see Scary Jerry go. Scary Jerry was a very fun player to watch, but, you know, I don't blame Disguised for wanting to pick up Rahel if the option was there. Rahel had a very, very brief amount of time where when he was with Luan on SK, the two of them were in the conversation for best bot duo in the LEC. After that, it kind of all went downhill, and Rahel ended up getting replaced over there, and now he's here. So it's the same kind of deal as Futari, where it's like, yes, when these players were firing on all cylinders and they looked the best that they possibly could have, they were really insane players who could be at the top of this region. But it's been a while since they've been like that, so I'm not convinced that it's going to happen again. But overall, it should still be an upgrade. And then the last change is that Lion decided to go with Zamudo in the top lane. Zamudo is also a player who existed in the tier 2 NA system, and another player who I never found particularly notable, so I don't think anything is going to come from that. That's all of the roster changes in the LTA North. There's only 4. Like I said, not much going on here. So now we can start talking about the teams. 100 Thieves. They're keeping the same roster that they've had for a while now. I'm really not big on this team. I feel like this team has kind of hit a wall and they stopped improving, which is sad because you would think that when they have the type of players like Sniper and Quid, these are the type of players that should always be improving and should be pushing this team to greater heights. But it seems like 100 Thieves is just not growing at nearly the same rate as the other high caliber teams in this region. The big 4 being 100 Thieves, Fly, TL, and C9, of course. I think that 100 Thieves started being able to compete with all of them, and then even having that one split where they were the best, and now they've kind of fallen out of favor, and they're probably only barely scraping into 4th or 5th. I still think that River is pretty good. I still think that FBI is pretty solid, but I don't think that Ayla holds up. I think Ayla is probably a bottom half support in this league. I think that Quid and Sniper are both fairly inconsistent. Sniper can have decent lane phases sometimes, and he has good mechanics, and he'll have a pop-off game every now and then, but he also makes a lot of random mistakes. It feels like he doesn't like to play side lane at all, or doesn't know how to play side lane the way that other professional top laners do. So 100 Thieves kind of end up with this issue where nobody's playing on sides, and then they just go 5 mid in classic old school NA fashion. This is kind of the type of team this is. They have a lot of problems playing around with objectives and whatnot, so I don't have a lot of faith in 100 Thieves. I think that if this team reaches their theoretical ceiling, they could still be good. There were periods of time where River was the best jungler in the region. There have been games where Sniper looks like a super promising talent. Quid was literally a former MVP, so it's like this team has it in there somewhere, but I think it's gotten to the point where they've fallen behind a bit too much. Next, you have C9. This is the team that I actually thought was going to win Spring. I was pretty adamant, even after they got destroyed by Fly in regular season and then lost to Fly in upper bracket finals, that I still thought that C9 was going to win, and then obviously they didn't. That said, I think this is a super strong team, not only domestically, but even on a global stage, because we saw what Fly can do on the global stage at MSI when they had a decent series against BLG and then dismantled the LEC, so we got to see Fly look pretty decent. And in my opinion, C9 and Fly are on relatively the same level. I mean, they took each other to 10 games. In the final deciding game in that Game 5 in Grand Finals, C9 and Fly were pretty neck and neck, and it just came down to one big mistake from Blapper on a 3rd dragon. But even after that mistake, they were still able to take it all the way to Elder, and Fly needed to go for a crazy backdoor angle in order to win. So in my eyes, C9 and Fly are kind of in that same tier of teams that I think could be promising heading into Worlds, so I'll have C9 above 100 Thieves. Talking about the team specifically, I think that Thanatos is the best top laner in this region. I think he's insane. Not only mechanically, but just the way that he handles his matchups, the way that he plays team fights. I love everything about this guy. Honestly, same thing with Loki. I don't know if I would be confident to say that Loki's the best mid laner in the region yet, but I think he can get there, and he also reminds me of a very Thanatos-like player, where I feel like Loki has a very nice champion pool and can navigate lanes well and can team fight well and all of that stuff, so their solo laners are super promising. Vulcan has been a huge surprise to me. Vulcan kind of had a disaster year in 2024, I thought, where he did not look very good at all. Nothing like how he used to look. But this year's been a big turnaround for him. It kind of feels like Prime Vulcan all over again, where he can play almost anything at a serviceable level, and then if he gets his hands on an engage, he's just a monster. That's how Vulcan used to feel, and that's how he feels now, to me at least. I think that Vulcan is definitely in conversation for best performing support this split. And then Sven also has been playing a lot better than I thought he was going to. I kind of always in my head grouped Sven in with a bot laner like FBI. I thought they were kind of cut from the same cloth, and I thought that both of them would be pretty easily eclipsed by players like Masu and Jan, but Sven has really showed up. I still wouldn't say that he is the bot laner I would want on my team over Masu and Jan, but he's also definitely a bot laner who is worthy of being on a top LTA North team, so happy to see that. And then you have Blabber, who there's obviously the upside, right? He's a very aggressive player, so he can get your team advantages that other junglers won't be able to get you. He has good mechanics, he's a fearless player, he has a big champion pool, but his issues where he will play situations too aggressively, or he'll go for fights that aren't there, and then he'll end up being a super big inter that can lose you games. That hasn't changed at all, and it honestly doesn't seem like it's trending in the right direction. So Blabber is still a top level jungler for this region, but I don't think he's necessarily going to be contesting Inspired anytime soon. Then we can look at Dig. I already said my piece on Photon. I think that Photon, at his vitality peak, could be contesting the top spots in this region. We're talking like top 3, top 2 top laners here, but I'm not expecting that from him. More realistically, I'm expecting him to fall middle of the pack, somewhere near the Fudge Impact tier of player. When Photon was at his peak, he was kind of a matchup beast, where he would be able to win most, if not all, lanes, and then he could also teamfight very well, so he does have promise, but I have to see it before I'll believe it, since he's pretty far removed from LEC at this point. Then you've got Shaden. I still don't have a great read on this guy. I don't personally think he's insanely good or anything. I expect him to be a middle of the pack jungler. Kane, I had hopes for heading in, but he hasn't been performing as well as I would want him to perform either. I think that Tomo is probably the worst bot laner in this league, although I don't necessarily think that Tomo is terrible, but I still would put him near or at the bottom. And then same deal with Isles. I think that Isles is at or near the bottom of the support pool. So this team overall just seems pretty underwhelming to me. I don't think that their bot duo is going to be doing anything special. I don't think that their mid laner is doing anything special. Their jungler maybe has potential, and their top laner might be good, maybe, depends. So I don't think this change will do much for Dig as a whole. I think it's definitely an upgrade, but I don't think it will be forcing them into top 4 or anything like that. Then you've got Disguised, and I'm still not a fan of this team, personally. I think that XU is bottom of the barrel for junglers in this region. Castle has occasional games where he can look pretty good, but then most of the time he's doing something extremely questionable. Darkwings, I have never actually watched a full game from him. Well, maybe I've watched a full game, but if I did watch a full game, I wasn't really paying attention to what he was doing. So I don't want to have a read on that, but just knowing the level of most tier 2 mid laners, I wouldn't expect anything crazy from him. Rahel, same boat as Photon, could be really good maybe, but more likely will just be middle of the pack. And then Huhi, despite the fact that I've never been a big Huhi fan, I don't think he's that great. I also think that the support pool in this region overall is not that great, so I would still say that Huhi's probably middle of the pack there. So this Disguised team, I don't think that their roster will be upgraded all that much. I'm going to keep them below Dig. Yeah, that's all I've got to say on that front. Then you've got FlyQuest. This team has to go first. They dispatched Cloud9 every single time they've played against each other. Inspired has shown that he can compete with the best junglers in the world. My personal opinion was that he was a top 3 jungler at MSI. I also thought he was the best Western player at MSI. Whippo, who sometimes can be a liability for this team, actually had a really good MSI in my opinion. He was still doing some of the stuff that he always does, where he kind of picks funky Whippo champions that might be good, but sometimes are just not. And then he also had some of his random deaths that he'll have, but for the most part, his team fighting really shone through. I thought that he had fantastic team fighting pretty much from the start of the tournament to the end of the tournament, so I've kind of turned a bit on my initial Whippo stance, and I'm now back in the camp that I think that this guy is probably one of the best top laners in this region. Right now, I would personally have him as second, actually, right behind Thanatos. Quad had an extremely disappointing MSI. I thought that Quad kind of looked like a dumpster fire at MSI, but I don't think he's going to struggle too much against the mid lane pool here. Other than maybe Loki, I don't actually think there are any super elite laning mid laners here that can make Quad struggle the same way that he did at MSI. And also a lot of Quad's issues came down to the fact that he just wasn't playing many of his champions. The team kept on putting him on stuff like Ryze and Annie, which are just not champions that I think of when I think of this guy. Then their bot lane, we all know that Massif had his fair share of incidents, but I also thought that overall he wasn't terrible. Like, obviously he committed some crimes against BLG, but he also had some super good plays over the course of the tournament. He had some good team fights. And then Busio, Busio also played crazy. I think that Busio was for sure one of the best Western players at the tournament as well, up there with Inspired and... Actually, yeah, I would say that Busio was better than everybody from the LEC at the tournament. Definitely, I got more from Busio this tournament than I have from any other showing that he's ever had, so now I'm super excited to see where he can go. So I'm going to have Fly in first, definitely over C9, although I wouldn't be too shocked if C9 can improve over the course of summer and end up taking that first place slot. I think that it will be between these two teams. These two teams feel a step above everybody else to me right now. Then you've got Lion replacing Licorice with Zamudo, rest of the team staying the same. I mean, honestly, I don't really know what to say about this team. If Zamudo ends up being the stock standard tier 2 top laner that I think he's going to be, I would imagine that he would be the worst top laner in the region. I think that Audi is arguably the worst jungler in the region. Saint is like bottom 2, Henna's probably bottom 2 or bottom 3, Lions is also probably bottom 2, bottom 3, so this team really, they've got nothing going for them. I don't think that they have much firepower at all. Honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, I could see them losing to Disguised, I think. I think Disguised have better bot lane and will likely have a better top lane, so you know what? I'm gonna put Lion in dead last, actually. I think that before I always had Disguised in last, but I'm changing my mind. I'm gonna put Lion in last this time around. Then you've got Shopify Rebellion. They had a little bit of a miracle run near the end of the split where they ended up placing third, which I think is really funny because they ended up going, I ended up putting them third in my original power rankings video. And then despite the fact that I originally said that I thought Shopify was going to be third, and then they ended in third, I still think that I placed them too high on my original list because the way that Shopify got third was not the way that I would have wanted them to get third. They had a pretty disastrous regular season. I think they ended like 4-9 or 4-11 or some kind of abysmal record. And then they just kind of randomly turned it up in playoffs and were able to just beat some teams. The main reason why this team looked good to me is because Fudge stepped it up big time. Fudge had like an amazing spring split. He looked almost, if not as good as he ever looked on Cloud9. I would say that Fudge has definitely put himself in top half top laners in this region. Contracts and Palafox are both, they can be good sometimes. I don't think either of these guys are insane. I would say that they are both middle of the pack in their roles. Same thing with B-Voy. I think B-Voy is probably middle of the pack. He is pleasantly consistent, which I like about him. And he has a lot of champions that he can play, but I don't think his ceiling is crazy or anything. And then Seos, you know, I've been hyping this guy up for a long time, and I still think he's pretty good, but he's definitely not on the level as the top tier supports in this region, like Busio, Vulcan, or even maybe Core JJ. But I think that Seos has done okay for himself. Overall, I think this team is going to finish roughly middle of the pack. I will personally put them above 100 Thieves. I think that there's totally a chance that 100 Thieves are just better, but I like the way this team has been trending. I think that most of the players on Shopify have shown a lot of improvement over the course of the year, whereas the 100 Thieves players feel like they're kind of stagnant or maybe even going backwards in some ways. Then you've got TL. TL, I think I'm going to end up putting TL higher than most people would imagine because TL ended up, Umpty ended up soft quitting. Part of me still thinks that even if Umpty didn't want to quit, TL were still going to look to replace him with UG anyway. There's kind of two stories to this. So one, you could go by how TL performed during the split and in playoffs, and you could say that they looked like a little bit of a disaster and they weren't meshing with UG well at all, and UG did not look good, and in fact the team maybe even looked better with Umpty. And I think there's the other train of thought where after TL released the Thank You Umpty video, we kind of got to see that this team actually had quite a few internal issues. And then also UG is a player who, what is going on with my left eye, by the way? I don't know if anybody else has been noticing throughout this video, but like my left eye is like doing this like weird shit where it's like half closing. I don't, it's so funny. Have I just been like drunkenly winking this entire video? Who knows? Anyways, getting back to my, there it goes again. Okay, anyways, getting back to my UG umpty thing. I think that most of Yuji's issues just came from the fact that he was kind of thrust into the spot and didn't have much practice, didn't have much scrim time, I'm imagining, so hasn't been able to build his synergy. But based on what I've been hearing from scrim results and stuff, it sounds like a lot of teams were actually thinking that TL was better with Yuji in the jungle than they were with Umpty, and then it just didn't translate on stage because they had so little time. So me personally, I'm going to still view it as Yuji being either a side grade or an upgrade, and I'll just wait to see how good he can be this split. But on that grounds, I still think that impact is solid. I think he's definitely at this point like a step below the top tier top laners here. I would put him on like Fudge level. I think that APA is still better than people give him credit for. Something that people might not be thinking about necessarily is that APA's champion pool was always stuff like Nico mid, Ziggs mid, Talia, Cassiopeia, and while this has hurt him in the past, heading into Summer Split, Nico mid was buffed for MSI. Talia is currently arguably the strongest mid laner in the entire game for pro play. Ziggs just received a massive buff, and Cassio is like definitely playable right now. So basically what that means is that all of APA's champion pool is either viable or stronger than it used to be back when he was like still playing it. So I think that this is looking to be a good split for APA. Even if you ban out his entire champion pool, it's still like you're going to have to use the bans, which means that it frees up space for the rest of his team. So I think that APA will be a valuable asset to the team this split. And then I think that Yon and Core JJ are one of the better bot duos in this region. Yon to me is a super promising player, which a few years ago, if I heard myself say that, I would call myself crazy because I used to think that Yon was pretty garbage. So he definitely proved me wrong. I'm going to move TL up to third. I think that TL is here. As mentioned, I think that Fly and C9 are for sure the two best teams in this region. Then after that, I would actually have TL kind of in their own little plane. I think that they are the, for me, clear third place right now. Then after that, I'm going to have Shopify and 100 Thieves kind of grouped together below TL. It's cool that Shopify got third in spring, but the way that they did it, I don't think they'll be able to repeat it that easily. They kind of managed to do it because TL had this lump with their whole entire roster back and forth and problems with Umpty's mental health and whatnot. Then below that, I would have Dignitas kind of alone in 6th. And then below that, I would have Disguised and Lion kind of fighting for that 7th, 8th place slot. So yeah, shorter video. Not much to talk about here. They didn't have very many roster changes. There's only 8 teams. And a lot of these players are familiar players that have been playing in this league for a few years now, so not too much to touch on. Oh, I guess the last thing I'll mention, for anybody curious, is that based on the summer format, the summer playoffs format, there will only be a maximum of 2 teams from this region actually qualifying for Worlds. So even if Fly, C9, and TL are all significantly better than the LTA South teams, it'll still only be 2 out of the 3 of them qualifying, because if we take a look at the format for the regional championship, you can see here it's going to be top 3 LTA North teams, top 3 LTA South teams. Seed 1s automatically get placed in round 2, and then Seed 2 and 3s play here. And the way that this tournament works is that only the Seed 1s get double elimination, and if you lose this match, you get placed into here. So if we imagine a world real quick where both of the if we imagine a world where the LTA North wins every single match, you have the 1 seed for LTA North going here, then you would have 2 seed and 3 seed from the North playing each other. One of them will get knocked out. Whichever team doesn't get knocked out will be the 3rd team, along with the 1 seed from the LTA South that is already here. So you would have guaranteed 1 spot for each of these regions, and then these 4 teams are essentially competing for the 3rd spot. So yeah, I just figured I would point that out. So what I would imagine in my head is that Cloud9 and Fly are going to get the 2 spots, and I think that would be best for the region. So we'd have to see. Yeah, nothing else to really say. That's about it. See ya.